Okay, so this is presumably the first video in the series. Might not be, but the title down below will denote which one this is in the actual series. So this is one of the videos in our series which we're aiming to help describe, some of the concepts for the makers in our space, for Power App developers, and kind of bridge the gap to here are what the enterprise folks are actually talking about. Here's how we can hopefully help and bridge the information gap that might exist in your scenario. So today, I'm Ray Ko, and today I'm joined with my friend and colleague Diego, and we're going to take on two different personas. Myself, I'm going to be the enterprise nerd, the guy who's got a lot of requirements, but I haven't actually told you what my requirements are. And then Diego is going to be our maker, so our Power Apps maker today.
So on Makers today, I got in a situation where probably like many folks, I need to build this application, but I really don't know where to start. So Ray, I'm gonna turn to you, and hopefully you can answer some questions that I have. So the first one that I would like to understand as a maker, what is an API?
Yeah, you'll probably hear that a lot. Your enterprise developer will go, "Hey, why don't you just consume the API that I already have, right? Like, why don't you just use that?" And so you're gonna be confused, like, what? Okay, well, first, what is an API, right? So, like if I have to literally spell it, the acronym API. A is for application, P is for program, and I is interface. That's what the acronym stands for. But really, if we think about an API, this is all it really is, right? Here's my black box. Here's my enterprise application that I want you to consume. You'll hear that word a lot. So here's my app over here. If I can write properly, APP. And the API is basically a way for me to expose to you as the consumer of my app ways to use it, right? Either get information out of that black box or get information into it, and then the how it works inside those details you'll never need to know. But I'll basically expose my application to you. So basically, an API is a way for me to expose my application. So if I try to denote that in my diagram with these sort of twigs that are sticking out of my black box, this is part of my API. This is my API surface, so to speak, right? So these are the endpoints that I want you to call. Like this is how you consume my app. So if you're building your Power App here on the left-hand side, right? This poorly drawn diagram. This is your Power App. Okay, you
I,
want to
I'm
use
glad this is not an arts class.
yeah. It is. I used to be when I was a kid. I used to draw comic books, and I was actually pretty decent at it. Now in my middle age, I'm terrible. But
You didn't make a career out of that though.
well, this is look what I'm doing, right? Um, so here's your Power App on the left-hand side. So I write it. It's got an interface. Maybe I have like a form field that allows me to enter text into it. And then when I hit enter or I hit, usually it gets some kind of like return button. That's what this arrow is trying to be, right? I'll write text in here, and I want that to save to this API, this backend place for me to save stuff. So one of these three twigs on the right-hand side will be the like what we call a put request. We'll talk about REST in a different video. What is REST? What is RESTful calls? But basically, let me change the color a little bit. Hopefully, this color is good
Yeah.
for you
Show
folks
me
at
some
home.
some extra colors there, please.
Yeah. So I'm gonna orange. Hopefully, orange is the color that you can see and distinguishes it out. But this endpoint, I'm gonna call this my write endpoint. RITE, not RIGHT, RITE. And my app, I want to save the information I put into this text box, right? So I just put it in text. I want this text to save to my backend. So in order for me to do that, I have to call this write endpoint in the API, this app that I've exposed here on the far right hand side. In order to do that as well, so one thing that you are probably familiar with in the Power Apps world is the idea of a connector. Right here, custom connector, right? So those are for things that aren't built out of the box as part of the Power Platform. Someone else wrote that. It could have been me, right? As part of someone in your enterprise, I made a connector, a custom connector for you to consume my app via this API in a way that makes it easier for you. In any case, likely what's going to happen in our application workflow is, okay, your Power App will call this custom connector in purple here, or this middle box, right? In a way that you are familiar with writing code in or calling. So this will be the method or the function or the action that the custom connector exposes. In turn, the custom connector knows that, okay, I called this particular action. Maybe we'll call it the write data to backend action. And then that will in turn know how to call and write the data to my API in the backend. Right. So all really an API is, and there are different types of APIs. It just exposes an application or something that I'm trying to consume, either read or write from, typically, right, somewhere, and it gives me that ability to do so. So that's all an API really is.
Right.
There's
Well,
some
one thing that's never clear to me as again, like as a maker, the when I have this API, so I understand that I have Power Apps. I'm gonna use a connector, and then that connector will reach out and then either read or write to your application. So you're developing that, and you expose some of these endpoints, right? You expose like ways that I, as a maker, I can, either save or edit or do things like that on your application. But one thing that I think I would love to hear from you, um, why does it matter? Is that another way? I mean, you have an API, let's suppose like it's a writing endpoint. Does it matter because if you change the internals of your app, so that blue box that you have there, um, you can do whatever you want inside, but the external side, which is the little yellow circle that you have there, that stays consistent. But internally, you can do whatever you want, right? Is this a benefit for you as a developer? I'd like to understand that if you can explain.
like me as a Power App developer. Is that a benefit to
No,
me?
you as a, what we're calling here like the enterprise developers, right? You're
Ah,
you're exposing that out, and I'm just trying to understand like, is there any other, what's is that a benefit when you're using an API?
for me to consume my own API or like
No,
another
for
one?
myself. Yeah, so it'll be myself consuming your API, so it doesn't change that right for me as a Power App developer or maker. That doesn't change, but for you, your benefit is what you can change whatever you want, but
Yeah, yeah.
it
So
doesn't
basically,
it doesn't affect me. That's what I'm going for.
it's a contract, right? Like anything else. I just tell you that, hey, if you did want to write data, just call this endpoint. I mean, what I can do, independent of whatever you do on the left hand side, is again, it's a black box to you. But for me, like maybe a write, with the first version of it, it'll write to this database over here, denoted by a cylinder usually. If you see this in diagrams, database A. Because it's a black box to you, again, I've only guaranteed
Exactly.
you that if you just write to this, orange write endpoint here in the middle, that I'll guarantee that it'll write to something, it'll store somewhere, and you can get the data back again through the same contract and maybe through this, lower endpoint here. If you wanted to read things back, you could do it. This API is a contract. Under the hood, right? Again, is a black box. If I decide to change the underlying way that it saves, right? Because I'm an enterprise developer. I might change my attitude from day to day, week to week, or we have pressing matters and we have to change to a
Sure.
database. I can. And again, that doesn't matter to you. It's a black box, transparent. It's a guarantee to you that if you call my write endpoint, if you call my read endpoint, you'll get the data the way that you expect it to, right? And then I can do whatever I need to in the back end to save the data.
Okay, now this makes sense. I think we in software development or in software engineering, we hear a lot of what you're just describing here, including typically API and contracts in the same conversation, right? We have that. So I think for folks who are making this, those are terms that they wanna get familiarized with. So the contract, which you just mentioned here, I think it's an important aspect of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to break that out, this, we heard things like API, endpoint, contract, surface. Those are all kind of related things. It's relating to that. How do I actually like what is the agreement that you and I? What is our handshake to say? How can I guarantee you to get information, and how can you guarantee when you talk to me, I know what you're talking about, or what kind of data that you're going to pass over to me, right? And so that is our API, right? That's essentially the interface of where application program interface. That's the interface that we're working at there.
And Ray, I mean, you mentioned also versions here. Again, from a Power App maker here, I can be graded, I suppose. I can be exposed to different APIs, right? It can be version 1, version 2, because you are developing different versions. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I mean, I've kind of made it simplified or like overly simple or contrived in terms of the example. When I say that if I change the backend, the database, or whatever happens inside the black box, that it's just as simple as I'm just going to change it and it'll be the same to you. But sometimes, uh, I might create what's known as a breaking change, meaning, the way fundamentally that the data is being saved or what I require from you changes. I can't make it transparent. I can't just keep the same way that we were doing business. I have to basically make a new version, right? There are breaking changes. If you call that endpoint again, it's not guaranteed. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to version it. So the original way that you were calling me, we'll call that v1, right? API v1. Usually they'll have this version, and so your connector might be versioned to the same value, right? So it might have my custom connector. And I'll do this back in purple again. This custom connector might also be version 1. And so if it does come to the point where, oh, we've made so many changes, or there's a more efficient way to do things, or maybe the way that we were doing it in the past doesn't make any sense anymore, we have to come up with a new API, right? It might still do fundamentally the same thing, just goes about it a little bit differently. But fundamentally, again, it will break things. If you try to call it the new way, it's not going to. You try to call the new endpoint the old way, it's not going to work. The contract is completely different. So what we'll end up doing is, okay, so maybe we create a connector v2, okay? That will in turn call API v2, and I'm mixing colors now, so I apologize. This may introduce either more endpoints, more things that I can call to do different kind of methods or functions, or it could expose the same endpoint by name, but what I expect from you as data may change, right? So instead of, like maybe I in version 1, this text that you were sending, maybe it was someone's name and it was the full name, right? But in version 2, I expect actually you to send me data that's first name and last name. And as a result, if you try to call version 2 without first name and last name, you try to call it the version 1 way with just sending me full name, it's not gonna work because it's gonna error out, it's gonna break, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And when we say versioning and API versions and breaking changes and things like that, to keep an eye on that. Understand that it's fundamentally the way that we were doing business before. The contract between us has changed, and so if you want to do it a certain way, if you wanted to the contract a certain way, you have to call that specific version or that specific contract or that specific API in a certain manner in order to get job done.
Sounds good. I think that kind of ties it up for me. So thank you.
Yeah, hopefully that was that helped you, clarified, and didn't make things more confusing.
No, absolutely.
Right.
This does help.
All right. Until the next time, until the next video.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Until the next one.